Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns wrapped up the offseason program this week with mandatory minicamp. Deshaun Watson threw two of the days and let it rip, which is a great sign. On the opposite end of the spectrum was wide receiver Amari Cooper holding out. Here to discuss that and more is Dave Chudowsky of WKYC Morning News. Hey, Chud.
Hey, Scott, Father's Day weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Yeah, how about that, huh? Little
It's a
U.S.
great weekend.
Open. Yeah, a little U.S.
Mhm.
Open. Got a little tea time Sunday morning.
Got the official start to summer coming up
Yeah.
soon. Yeah, it's a good point with the golf there. It's always a great cookout. And how about the heat wave we got coming up? You've been paying attention to that? Yeah, I'll tell you this right now. Be glad that minicamp was this week and not next week.
Really? I actually have not been paying attention to that.
It's going to be big time hot next
Ooh,
week, starting on Sunday. But
okay.
Monday is when it really turns. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, upper 90s.
Oh my gosh.
It's a heat wave,
No
okay?
kidding.
And you're not going to get any relief at night. It's one of those going to be those summer nights where it's just humid and hot. So
Wow.
yeah, you be thankful that mini camp came when it did because next week's going to be a scorcher.
Wow, no kidding. Maybe I'll go to the desert for some relief.
You should do that.
Yeah,
You
maybe I
should do
will.
that, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So real quick before we dive in, let's just let everyone know where the Browns fall right now. This past week was mandatory mini camp. What happens now moving forward? It's break time until mini camp,
The training camp. Yeah.
training camp. Yeah, training camp. Yep.
Yeah. The players are out of here. Sometimes they keep the rookies around for a little bit longer. I don't know if that's the case this year. But everybody will be back for training camp. They bring the rookies in a little early. The quarterbacks can come in a few days early. But I think the whole team either reports July 23rd or they haven't announced the full schedule. So we're looking at July 23rd, July 24th. At the first day of practicing green or at the Greenbrier in West Virginia is supposed to be July 25th. So it's 5-6 weeks from now. The players get to do whatever they want. It's kind of a dead period in the league. Coaches are supposed to let the players be. Obviously they still work out. Deshaun Watson talked about, getting together with the guys. Denzel Ward said they might do that on defense too. So, it's not like the players just go on vacation, don't do anything. They're still working out. They're still throwing and running and, in the playbook. But it is a break. It's a vacation. And it's the same for the coaches. This is really the biggest downtime in the NFL calendar.
Yeah, no question. So if we look back at this past week, I think the top story is Amari Cooper, right? I think him not reporting. I'd say Watson is right there. I think it's kind of like a 1-2 thing, but let's just get the Cooper out of the way. And I don't think you need to explain a lot of it. Most
Right.
Browns fans by now know it. I guess it's more what's your opinion on it? I mean, do you think this is a big deal?
I do think it's a big deal, Chud, and I do think it's clearly well, not clearly, but I think it's the biggest story coming out of the week. Um, well, that's debatable because I did my takeaways and I led with Watson and went Cooper number two. So that's a debate. But first of all, I was surprised that he didn't show up for minicamp. And I knew it was a possibility because of where his contract situation sits. He's entering the last year of his deal, $20 million. And usually when you hold out, it's in the last year of your contract, right? Because I think the player feels like there's some leverage there. You're not tied in for a long term after that. Plus, receiver contracts have skyrocketed. When Cooper signed his deal, he was with the Cowboys. When he signed his deal, he was the second highest paid receiver at 20 million a year behind Julio Jones. Now he's tied for 20th. So it's a big drop off, right? It's a big change. We saw Justin Jefferson of the Vikings signed for 35 million a year last week, or it was within the last week or two. And there's a bunch of guys like that, right? And so I think Cooper looks at that and says, well, I should get paid more. And you can make that argument. I think Cooper's better than the 20th best receiver in the league, right? So I understand where he's coming from. Now, why I'm surprised is he's always struck me the 2 years he was here as the ultimate team player. He talks about the importance of practice, the importance of not missing any games, not missing any reps. So I think it probably was a difficult decision for him. I think I think it's tough, and I think he just felt that he either needed to make a stand. This was the time he had to do it. Now, what's interesting to me, Chud, is I don't know how this gets resolved. Like, and I wrote this in a analysis yesterday. Like the Browns can play hardball with Cooper and say, "Hey, you're under contract. You have to report." And if you don't, like, he got fined $100,000 for the total of missing 3 days of minicamp. And training camp, if he skips days, the fines will continue to come. So that's a choice he would have to make. Now, maybe he just says, the Browns say, "Hey, we're not going to do it, and we're not going to trade you, and here you're stuck." And he shows up for training camp and, puts on his best face and goes to work and says, "Okay, I'll play well and I'll earn a contract after the season." Maybe that happens. But he wants more money. So what do the Browns do to try to appease him, to make one of their best players, one of the most respected players, happy? I don't think they can just give him a raise because then that sets a terrible precedent, right? Every player would say, "Hey, I need a raise." There'd be a long line outside Andrew Berry's door. So to me, the best resolution, and I want to know if you agree with this, Chud, is to sign him to a short-term extension with a small raise. And if that's 2 years, $44 million, if it's 2 years, $50 million, feels like the cap to me from a Browns perspective. And it's not that Cooper doesn't deserve more when you look at how the receivers rank. He turns 30 on Monday. And you got to be careful with guys that age at that position, right? There tends to be a fall off. You don't run as fast. You get hurt more. And Cooper's a guy that hasn't missed a lot of time in his career, but he was slowed the last 2 years at the end of the seasons with injuries. He had core muscle injury in 2022 that required off-season surgery. He had a heel injury last year, kept him out of the Jets game. And then I thought it affected him in the playoff loss to the Texans. So I think for the Browns, that's the number one thing keeping them from just saying, "Yeah, we'll give this guy an extension," because in his 2 years here, he's certainly played like a guy that deserves an extension.
Well, it's funny, before you wanted to ask my opinion on it, I was going to come out, and the next thing I was going to say to you is, now when you look at these other receivers that have signed these big deals, like Jefferson,
Yeah,
and the list goes on. I mean, there's many others, right?
right.
Many of them are young, right?
For sure.
And they're signing long-term deals. So my concern with this is, I understand the Browns situation as to where they're probably in a situation where they don't really want to make that decision right now as to whether they want to sign him for 5 years. And part of what they made that trade was they probably felt like they were making a trade not only to get a great wide receiver, but to get the deal that he was in. And
Yes.
I'm guessing the last thing they want to do is say, "Hey, we're going to sign you to a 5-year deal that's paying big dollars that puts you at 35 or 36 or whatever it would be when it's over." So I could see where the Browns stand on this, but I also see where he is, because he probably sees that as well. And he's like, listen, he's trying to land that big contract before anything happens this season, because you never know what might happen. So I can see the struggle or the theory or how both sides feel on this.
Right, which
And
makes
I
it
think
hard.
you actually,
Doesn't that make it hard to come up with a resolution?
yes, it does. And, the other thing I think is, man, you said it, I read that, you just said it, $100,000. I don't care how much money you make. No one wants to throw away $100,000. So if you're throwing away $100,000, you're doing it because you are assuming that you're going to make way more to make up for that.
That's 100%. That's 100% correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if he doesn't get a new deal and he just threw away $100,000, boy, what a waste of money. I mean,
Correct.
even for these high profile athletes that you say, oh, I mean, obviously $1 million, 20 million, 30 million, how much more do you need? Well, usually these athletes want as much as they can get. And how many stories do you see where something happens to where they run out of money, or the lifestyle they live, money matters at the end of the day. So you're right. I mean, your example or resolution might be the only option that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it is. Now, the Browns would have to say, okay, we think he's going to continue to be productive for at least the next year or two, right? In order to sign him to a short-term extension. And I think they'd probably be okay with that because they don't have a replacement on the roster. I mean, they signed Jerry Jeudy to the extension, and Judy's making, I think it's 17 million. So that's receiver number 2 money. And Jeudy has not proven that he's a number 1 receiver yet. And Cooper has, right? Cooper's a 5-time Pro Bowl. So that's where Cooper has leverage is, the Browns are trying to make a Super Bowl run here, and he's their best receiver, and they're trying to support their quarterback, and they don't have another option, right? So that's where his leverage is. Now, if the Browns say, okay, we need him, it's important to have him, let's give him this short-term extension, Cooper's going to, in my opinion, have to put some ego aside because I think he's going to want a bigger raise, and I just don't think the Browns are going to be prepared to give it to him, and that's where there could be issues. But the reality is, I think nobody would give it to him, right? I don't think there's a team out there or teams out there lining up to give Amari Cooper $30 million because he is 30 years old. Because there's a ton of good receivers out there. There's a ton of young receivers. You can draft receivers, right? That's what we've seen the last several years. Few years at least. In the draft there's a million receivers taken early. Everybody thinks they're going to turn into number 1, and you can find other guys to catch the football. So that's why I think it's tough, Chud. And you talk about losing that, the $100,000. Well, I think you get the training camp, and I think it's like $50,000 a day. Now I'd have to double check that, but there's certainly fines for missing training camp. Well, what if the Browns do say, hey, we're not giving you an extension, and they stick to their guns, and then you get to the season? Well, it would be hard for me to picture Cooper sitting out any of the season because then you give up game checks, and we're talking millions of dollars, right? So does he give up all this fine money, report for week 1, and then play? But that's a bad situation. A bad situation for him because he's lost all his fine money. It's a bad situation for the team because he hasn't practiced with the offense, which is a new offense, or at least a tweaked offense under Ken Dorsey or with Ken Dorsey. He hasn't practiced with Deshaun Watson, at least at the facility. They might throw together in the offseason. And then you're more susceptible to injury, right? How many times have we seen guys come back from holdouts, and holdouts used to be more prominent than they are now, and they come back and they get hurt because they haven't had, even if he's working out on his own, which I'm sure he is, and I'm sure he would be, it's different getting on the grass. It's different practicing. It's different with contact. So there's just a lot of risk involved for everyone if this doesn't get resolved. And if Cooper doesn't come back in some better frame of mind than he obviously is right now.
So you were in Berea all week, obviously. You're there every day. How do you feel the Browns feel about this? Did you sense any concern from Stefanski? I mean, I know what he said.
Right.
Hey, we're worried about the people that are here. Do you get a sense that they feel like it's going to get done and we shouldn't worry, or do you feel that they are worried?
That's a good question, Chud. I didn't get an outward sense that there was worry. I know players kind of lined up behind Cooper, especially Deshaun Watson called him the best receiver in the game. He said that, and he said one of the best receivers. And that's the other thing. Like, Cooper's a Pro Bowl guy, and he had 1,250 yards last year, which I think ranked 10th in the league. So, like, he's a true number 1 receiver. He's a legitimate Pro Bowl guy, but he isn't the best receiver. And I really enjoy Amari Cooper. I think he's been outstanding. I think he's been great in the locker room. I really enjoy talking to him. He's not the best receiver in the league, right? Like, he doesn't, not that really matter. Like, Trevor Lawrence isn't the best quarterback in the league, and he just signed, right, the tied the largest quarterback contract. So you don't always get paid just because you're the best or not. But like, he deserves more money. He doesn't deserve Justin Jefferson money if we're just basing it on performance, right? And where I think he ranks in the league. So I think that's interesting. But my point is, like, a lot of the players lined up behind him. Hey, we know he's going to do what's necessary. We're not worried. It's only June. But having said that, I didn't get a sense that the organization was convinced this was going to somehow magically work out, right? Like, I think it's going to take nuanced negotiations. I think it's going to take good communication. And Andrew Berry and the organization has shown that it's good at that, that they're good at that. You know, but it feels different to me than the other two examples in recent time with the Browns are David Njoku demanded a trade, right? Demanded, and the Browns said, no, we're not going to trade you, right? And okay, he didn't have a whole lot of leverage. He sucked it up. He winds up getting an extension. Kareem Hunt had that hold in during training camp 2 years ago, wanted a new contract and or a trade, and the Browns said no, right? So this is different because Cooper wasn't here. It's different because Cooper is more established. He's more important to the team. Not that Njoku wasn't, but this is before Njoku broke out, right? This is while Njoku was still struggling to reach his potential. So to me, it feels different than that. I think the Browns are going to have to be maybe more flexible than they were in those two instances.
All right, let's get to Deshaun Watson now. And you just mentioned, and I have that on my notes to bring up to you, that he feels Cooper's the best, so you hit that. But we'll talk more about what Watson said. Let's dive into how he looked. You got to see him, I believe it was 2 of the days, right? Tuesday and Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was there every day, but he threw Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so
the every other day throwing program.
Exactly. So
what did you think?
Yeah, that made 4 times that the media got to see him throw over the last 3 weeks. We saw him throw in OTAs twice, I want to say, and then twice in minicamp. I thought he looked good, Chud. And we talked when I first saw him throw, we as a group first saw him throw, it looked easy to me, right? Well, in addition to it looking easy, I saw him rip some throws. He got into 7-on-7 drills, which was a step because he'd only been doing individuals and installments with no defense. So he played 7-on-7. So he had to throw some balls into coverage, and he threw them with velocity. So that was a check mark, right? Okay, he can do this. And then yesterday, he makes a play and he rolls to his left, doesn't really set his feet, and throws it 50 yards to Elijah Moore at the goal line. Now, it's an incompletion because it just goes off the fingertips of Moore. But it was certainly a good throw, and it was 50 yards, not with your feet set. If you can make that throw, to me, that checks about 10 boxes, right? So he's not at 100% yet because he's still every other day. They're still managing his repetitions. He didn't do any 11-on-11s. But nothing I saw makes me feel any concern, if you're a Browns fan, that Watson won't be 100% by week 1, that at some point in training camp, probably not day 1 of training camp, but at some point in training camp, maybe it is day 1 or 2, but he starts throwing back-to-back. He starts being on the normal routine where he doesn't miss any repetitions, right? He takes every snap he's supposed to take. I think that'll happen at some point in training camp. And, it looks like all systems go for week 1. And that's huge, right? Because this was the number one question facing this team, this organization, coming into this offseason after November 21st shoulder surgery. And it appears that he has passed all these tests with flying colors.
Well, let's get to this point, too. We'll get back to really focusing on Watson. But in general, no Amari Cooper. And Jerry Jeudy, is he hurt?
Yeah, he's dealing with something. This time of year, the Browns don't get real specific when you're talking injuries. He wasn't on the field Tuesday, which was concerning, right? And he was kind of hit or miss at OTA. Some of it he was there, some of it he wasn't. That's voluntary, so you don't know if he was hurt at that time or not. He was there early in OTAs and not there later in OTAs. But then we saw him on the field Wednesday, Thursday, and he was working on the side with the other injured guys. No obvious wrap, no obvious limp, no brace. So it feels like a minor injury. You know, the hope would be that day one of training camp, he's there and ready to go and 100%. I don't know that the Browns didn't get that specific, but it didn't seem like any concern from the team. But these are valuable practice reps, new to the team. You're missing your 1 and 2 receivers. So that made it tougher on Deshaun Watson in those 7-on drills or 7-on-7 drills, and tougher on the offense in general.
That's what I was going to ask the next question. Do you think it's a big deal that Watson's missing his number 1 and number 2 guy here in these practices?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal. Like when they're in the red zone and the defense shut them out yesterday, I think not having those 2 guys matters. Long term, I would say all reps matter. So it's somewhat of an issue. I don't think it's the biggest thing in the world. When we're talking about September, October, November, Watson did say that he plans to throw with those guys between now and training camp. So I think that helps. So yeah, I mean, it's worth noting. Obviously, I don't think it's the end of the world.
So Scott, from what you saw this week, you feel comfortable that Watson will be ready to go in training camp and he'll be out there for game number 1. I feel like we've all thought he'd be out there for game number 1, but is that 100%? Is that 90%? What do you think?
Yeah, it's as close to 100% as I can get, Chud. I don't think the shoulder is going to keep him from playing at all. Kevin Stefanski, there were enough throws yesterday, and it wasn't just a deep one to Moore. There was a deep crossing route to Jalen Darden. It was a really nice completion. It was a sideline route to David Njoku. You put those examples together, and it felt like his best practice that we had seen throwing, that I had seen throwing. So that got brought up with Kevin Stefanski, like, hey, doesn't this give you all this confidence going to the offseason? And you saw him do this today. And he said, I've been watching him throw for a while now. I get, he sees him more than we do, obviously. He said those questions had been answered for him earlier. So I think all of that together, if you're a Browns fan, I think you have confidence in that. Now it's just a matter of how does Watson play when the season gets here, right? But I don't think the shoulder's going to be an issue. To me, like we're going to go into training camp, and I don't think that's going to be one of my 5 things to watch is his shoulder, because I feel like that was, and maybe it will be, it's a long time away, but I feel like that was resolved over the last 2 months.
How did you feel listening to him? Do you feel he's in a good headspace with his interview? I felt like I don't know, nothing really stood out. I felt like there was a couple points where he maybe feels like he's still, like he realizes people are doubting him, and he feels like, hey, why do I have to prove myself? Like, did you get that at all?
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, right? There's a little bit of that, the quarterback rankings that people do at this time of year. He's lower than I'm sure he thinks he should be. He's lower than I think he should be. But I understand that, right? He's played 12 games in 2 years and hasn't, or 12 games in 3 years, right? He took 2021 off. So I think he understands that, even if he doesn't agree with it.
He mentioned all that.
Right. He kind of, went through, it's, I got to be on the field more. So he knows that, right? Everybody knows that. But so he acknowledges that. He acknowledged that. I thought him talking about the injury was interesting. Like, we hadn't talked to him since April. So, I asked him if he had any pain, and he said, my arm feels really well, I think was a quote. So he didn't say no, that he didn't have any pain throughout this process, but it doesn't look like he has any, right? And to me, that was another key moment. Key thing to watch. He's not shaking out the arm. There doesn't appear to be any discomfort, which to me is huge. So I'm sure at some point in this rehab, in recovery, he did have that, but he said the arm feels really good. He said he never doubted that he would come back, which, guys say that, some guys admit it, some guys don't. But he said he kept a really strong mindset throughout the process. He remains confident in himself. So, I didn't think there was anything earth-shattering from the interview. It was just, he feels like he's in a good spot.
let's do this quickly here. Just injury update. Anything to be concerned about? I know Myles Garrett, something happened in there yesterday, but it doesn't seem like it's serious. Just give us a quick injury update.
Yeah, Miles pulled up during a drill. He didn't. It's interesting. I make the distinction. He reached for the back of or for his left hamstring. He didn't grab the left hamstring, right? Like, you've seen guys get hurt, they reach for or they grab it right away, and it's like, oh, that's a bad sign. He just kind of felt it, walked to the trainer. He had no ice put on it, received no treatment, and just kind of watched the rest of practice. So, Stefanski said he'll be fine. I don't think it's anything to be concerned with. We got a long time to go before training camp. I guess here's what I think the update is, Chud, outside of Miles. Joe Bitonio, Jedrick Wills, Naheem Hines, I expect them to be ready to go day one or early in training camp. And they haven't practiced in OTAs or minicamp, all coming off knee surgeries. Jack Conklin, I think, is a little bit behind those guys coming off the ACL week 1 last year. So I think we'll see him in training camp at some point. I don't think I wouldn't expect that to be right away. Then you have Nick Chubb, who is probably further down the road, or not as far down the road as any of those guys. I would expect him to start training camp on the physically unable to perform list. And then it's a matter of if and when he can come back in training camp. Week 1 doesn't seem realistic to me. Nobody's ruled it out. But I feel like we'll be into the season before we see Chubb. But we'll have a better idea in June because he only started running in April, right? So it's still, we'll have a better idea in July when training camp starts. He only started running within the last couple months. So, we know how extensive that knee injury was, right? It was multiple surgeries, a lot of damage in there, multiple torn ligaments. So, those are the key guys that were on the sideline. Another couple, not as important guys. Cornerback Cameron Mitchell had a wrap on one of his legs, hasn't been practicing the last couple of weeks. So it feels like a soft tissue injury. When he comes back, is it day 1 in training camp? We don't know. D'Anthony Bell, the backup safety, worked inside with an injury, so we haven't seen him. We'll probably get an update closer or at the start of training camp with those guys, right? Because then the Browns kind of have to announce, who's in, who's out, who's on PUP, whatever. So, but overall, Nick Chubb is the key one to watch, and we're just not going to know that for a little while.
Scott, when we look at the offense, how much different is this offense going to be? I guess when Dorsey got hired, I was kind of thinking, they just need a babysitter to babysit Stefanski's offense. I felt kind of like that's the way it was in the past. It's Stefanski's offense.
Yes.
He calls the plays. But the more I'm watching this and listening to people talk and reading, and is there more to this? Is Dorsey's role a little bit more involved? Does that make sense? Like, should we be giving more respect to his position now, or?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think someone had a quote in a joke who someone said it was juicier.
Yeah, it was juicy. He called it juicy at his softball game Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chud. I think there's a happy medium to be found when we discuss the role of Ken Dorsey, because I have no doubt that he has a bigger role in a bigger influence, might be the better way to put it, on the offensive system than Alex Van Pelt did, right? That was Kevin Stefanski's offense. And you're right. Van Pelt was the caretaker, the babysitter, right? He watched the offense. He led the offense in meetings, those kinds of things. But Stefanski's imprints or fingerprints were all over that system. And then he called the plays on game day, right? So it was about Stefanski. With Ken Dorsey, things change, right? There's going to be more shotgun. I think we're going to see more RPOs. We're going to see more spread. And, I don't know exactly how that's going to look, Chud. Is it just more 3 receiver sets? Is it more 4 receiver sets? Is it just how guys line up? Is it David Njoku flexed out more than he has been, right? But there's a lot of talk about space. There's a lot of talk about freedom that the receivers and tight ends have in their route running. So yeah, I think it's going to look different. I think it's going to be more pass heavy than it has been in the past under Kevin Stefanski. Not that they're never going to run the ball, and we know that that's in Stefanski's DNA, but you're going to see changes that I think are going to be significant with Ken Dorsey. Having said that, there's a segment of, whether it's media, fans, whoever it is, that feel like this is all going to be Ken Dorsey, right? And there's just going to be night and day. And I want to push back against that a little bit, right? So I do think there'll be changes. I think we'll notice them. I think fans will notice. But I don't think Kevin Stefanski's disappearing, right? He's still a head coach, the head coach. He's still an offensive-minded coach. He's going to have a big influence. I think he's still going to call the plays. He's not made that decision, or at least not announced it. They're both calling plays in practice, like they're rotating who's calling in the plays of the quarterbacks. But I just don't want people to think that Stefanski's going to fade into the background. He's still going to have a big role in this, and we're still going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of Kevin Stefanski's ideas in this offense. Now, it's going to be different. There's going to be changes, but I don't think we're going to get away from the basics that we've seen the last 4 years, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, Scott, I know we have a couple other topics, but I think we can save those for next time we get together. Sure. I know you have a good feature story. I know I want to talk more about the kickoff. Oh, yeah. I know there's a lot of talk about that, but I think we can save those topics for next time. So unless you have anything you really wanted to hit, I'm going to, I'm going to start the Father's Day weekend early.
Yeah, no, I like that. The last thing I wanted to say, I have 3 notes written down. We covered all of them, except I mentioned the defense shutting out the first team offense in the red zone. The defense looked good to me, and they should. Their number 1 defense last year. A lot of guys back. It's 7-on-7s. They're missing Cooper. The offense is missing Cooper and Judy. But I did think it was noteworthy that, especially in the red zone, the defense made a bunch of plays. I feel like the defense has a chance to make another jump. As good as it was last year, I think it has a chance to make another jump. The defensive line is loaded and deep, especially at the tackle position. They might have the best cornerback group in the league. They got their safeties back. Like, you just see all these guys on the field together for the first time in minicamp, and that struck me is, man, this defense can be really good again.
Oh, that is great to hear. Love it. Love that.
All right. Well, thank you, Chud. You were good. Happy Father's Day, buddy. You enjoy it.
Happy Father's Day. Yeah.
Take at least the next week off from podcasting, Chud.
1 week?
At least 1 week. At least
okay,
1 week.
At least 1 week.
I'll keep the readers or the listeners in suspense. I'll give you at least 1 week off. I'll touch base when I get back from wherever I'm going. And we'll figure it out. But we got plenty to talk about. And then, before you know it, we'll be gearing up for training camp. But this is a downtime, so you take a little time for yourself.
Yeah. Well, you enjoy wherever you're going. I heard wherever you're going is a fantastic spot.
Yeah, I'm going to get a sign or a postcard from wherever I'm going.
Yeah, wherever you're going. Yeah. So, I enjoy that. I'll take a week off, maybe more. That's exciting, and we'll get back to it because, as always, there's always plenty to talk about.
Yeah, there is. So thank you, Chud. As always, thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.